Okay. Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome, good people, to weekly guided meditation. My name is Mike Zattel, Buddhist meditation teacher. Weekly, I'm doing these sits here. We can sit together, have a little bit of guided instruction, a little theory, a little Buddhist psychology, maybe. Today, I believe the title we're working with is Alongside of Discernment, Let There Be Metta. Yeah. Um, Oftentimes, there tends to be a sense of, how should we say, when we're doing um, vipassana meditation, it can be referred to as somewhat of a dry vipassana. That is, there's a very, very cold, clinical discerning of what is taking place. Let's see if I can get some transcripts going on. Fair enough. Okay. So let's get some terms down. So for people that might be newer to some of the terms that I use here, going back old school, taking these terms from Theravadan Buddhism. So that is one of the surviving older schools that essentially hold the original unelaborated teachings of the Buddha. So Vipassana is one of, well, it's essentially his main teaching style, his main technique, way of meditating that he brought into the system. A lot of the teachings that he put under the umbrella of what he taught essentially predated him. A lot of things like metta practices, shamatha practices, etc., were already around, and he was practicing them prior to him becoming what he became. It's the Vipassana practice that really made him unique and stand out. So vipassana, clear seeing, to see clearly or to see through. Yeah. So clear seeing in terms of to clarify our experience. Oftentimes, as we go through life, are we really experiencing life, or are we experiencing our own projections that we're throwing upon experience, looking through at the world through glasses that are colored with our own ideas, concepts, old habit patterns that are coming up that really distort our perception, drive our behavior. So the clear seeing, how is it that we can clarify our experience, gain increased discernment of what is actually happening, and clear seeing, how is it that we can see through it? How is it that we can see through the delusion that's happening? Yeah. So oftentimes referred to as insight practice. It's not necessarily psychological insights, although they can occur, but specifically, they talk about insights into dukkha, anicca, anatta, into suffering, into impermanence, into not self. The way that that makes sense to me, and the way that I usually work with it with students and clients, is oftentimes when we are experiencing some degree of stress, there is at the locus of that experience of I am, there's some worry, there's some stress, there's some sort of suffering that's taken place that tends to consume us to the degree that our whole sense of self becomes, for those moments, wrapped around that. Yeah. In that moment, we become the stress or the anger, fear, sadness, hopelessness, disgust, shame, embarrassment, and so on. How is it that we can break free of that? So it is clearly seeing of that dukkha at the core of the experience there. Yeah. And relating to it in a way where we can understand its impermanent nature, comes into being, passes away from being. The way that we tend to cling to it, grasp to it, add fuel to it in our thought process tends to perpetuate it. And then it becomes a prolonged identity, a prolonged mood state. Then what happens? We act out in particular ways, reify habit patterns of stress. So ideally, being able to clearly see the stress, be able to see the impermanence of it, and part of that impermanence is the going away, the fading away, and we're teasing apart that experience of our core I am from that stressor, and it begins to fall away. Or really any sensory experience, ultimately, we're observing how they come into being, flourish, and pass away from being independently of our creating it. Yeah. So that's the specific wisdom that arises from working with Vipassana. So when I talk about metta, the metta practice that comes from the Brahma Viharas, so we're cultivating altruistic states of the heart, essentially the kindness, the compassion, the sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Practice on its own. Very often, popularly, we're sending it out to others, to all beings of all times and all places. Specifically, we can work with, the loved one, the neutral person, the challenged person, etc. Sometimes directed towards ourselves, which can be rather challenging for a lot of us. Um, and so, what I'm going to be proposing today is a metta vipassana. Yeah. So, the third term that I'm going to be using is a sunyata, which means emptiness. Yeah. So in that dukkha anicca anatta, that anatta, or that not self component, it's just like, oh, this idea, this thought, this impulse that arises. Oh, I'm seeing that it's actually not me, not the core of my identity. Yeah. So there's that not selfing of that. But eventually we get to the place where every sensory experience that arises, we can discern that at the locus of it is not our core identity. So there becomes this emptying out of our stressing, the emptying out of our clinging, grasping, and there can ultimately be an emptying out of personality view. So, how's it all work together? What I'm going to be proposing today is, I guess, as implied by the term, alongside discernment, let there be metta. Um, there's a particular pattern that I've been working with, teaching with lately. We're using these four um, directives of discern, relinquish, or actually discern, cultivate, relinquish, and abide. So, in the discerning, yeah, can we have that clear seeing of what is taking place in a way where we are allowing our experiences to self liberate? Now, then, part of the way that we can allow that self liberating process to happen is if we can, well, as I was saying before, not add our thoughts to it, not add our emotions to it, not add a sense of clinging, grasping in a way that reifies that idea, that fantasy, that plan, that daydream. Instead, when we can clearly see what is taking place, can we look upon it? Old school, they'll talk about dispassion, viraga, view something dispassionately. Um, and yes, classically, that's what they say. I like to go a little further by, as we discern something, can we cultivate the metta? Having a surgically applicable cultivation of metta. So I'm noticing a particular pain that's arising in my back. As I'm noticing it, can there be alongside that an equanimity and acceptance? Can there be alongside of that a particular kindness to just this overall experience? In that noticing of that tension, that discomfort, can there be an overall compassion for that which is hurting? Yeah, so we're imbuing the sensory experience with metta, and so one of the things that helps to do is it helps to nullify, quantize any grasping, pushing, pulling experience that we may have as a reaction. Tends to quantize any of the hindrances, classically speaking, the various roadblocks towards liberation that come up. And it helps us to be able to relinquish, yeah, relinquish that sensory experience. So we're not grasping and we can allow it to move towards its fading away and cessation. And can we continue to abide in that way? The more that we can infuse our sensory experience that we are clearly seeing, infuse it with metta or any metta adjacent quality, it tends to allow these experiences to rise and pass. As things continue to pass and cease, there tends to be a emptying out. There tends to be a simplifying that can take place, potentially an increase of concentration, increase of tranquility, equanimity, of course, and some of these more classical, how shall we say, awakening factors can become present within our experience. So again, this discerning, cultivating, relinquishing, abiding. That's how, using those directives, that's how we're going to thread together the Vipassana Metta Sunyata. And if that's a lot, again, Just refer to the title uh, um, alongside of discernment. Let there be metta. That's all that we really need to know. So allow yourself to come to a comfortable upright position. So straightening up and settling in. Allow yourself to take a couple minutes to just settle. Just ease into this posture, getting a sense of whatever tensions that you discern, any muscles, knots that can be intentionally released. Go ahead and do so. The more still that we can keep our posture, the more we can notice the subtleties of our experience. Classically, meditations often with a shamatha focus in the beginning. We can place our attention on the breath, some part of the body that is actively engaged in breathing, be it the nose, throat, lungs, or belly. And just noticing the pleasant qualities of breath, the pleasant feel tones. So we can be with the feel out qualities, the objective sense of air entering and exiting. We can also lean into the pleasant feel tones that arise from focusing in this fashion. The more that you can allow yourself to lean into the pleasant qualities, that helps to gather all the strands of our attention, gather them together, and settle our attention, settle the mind. Samadhi, there's various translations, but one of the translations is to properly bring in place the mind. So, in this way, even that discern, cultivate, relinquish, and abide can apply here as well. Discern the pleasant qualities, discern the mind settling, simplifying, cultivate, cultivate an appreciation of, otherwise put, give yourself permission to feel that which is pleasant. That can help us relinquish tension, distraction, reactivity. We can abide in this way, cultivating concentration. Okay, good. Knowing the breath is always there, you can always go back to the breath at any time. Or even if you feel you can need a break or just simplify, then I invite you into this space of discernment, leaning into more of the Vipassana style. Just allow your awareness to be open to this experience of the body and various sensations that rise and fall. Some are pressure on pressure sensations, some may feel more emotive. And we can also be aware of the mind as well. Sensations rise and fall. Some may be more visual, the imagery that arises that we see. Some may be a little bit more auditory, the hearing arises and falls as well. So, free floating awareness within this body mind experience, just noticing moment by moment, sensations rising and falling. If you'd like to have a labeling set, label C whenever you're brought to seeing space, label hear whenever you're brought to hearing space, feel whenever you're brought in to the feeling sensations of the body. Or you can just silently just be aware. We can be aware of the sensations as they're coming into being and being active. We can be aware of them as they're fading, passing. We can also be aware of the emptiness, the rest states within seeing, hearing, and feeling as well. And with the theme, along with this discernment, let there be metta. So let's slow down a little bit, noticing sensory contact with a facet of your experience. It doesn't have to be everything, everywhere, all at once. You can just hone in to a facet of your experience at a time, a particular image, a particular hearing, a particular sensation in the body. Hang out with it and just infuse it with some degree of acceptance, friendliness, compassion, or appreciation, depending if it's unpleasant or pleasant. So allow there to be this nurturing quality in the act of contacting and discerning. Just slow down. Be clear about what it is you're contacting and infuse it. Infuse it with some degree of kindness, acceptance, equanimity. And notice if any rest states arise, or working this way may incline one to notice rest states where there's not much happening. Okay, good. So just keep going. So discerning the rise and fall, under the heading of discerning the rise and fall of sensory experience of our body and mind, maybe even the environment around. Clearly seeing. It's not our thoughts about it. There's no commentary about it. There's no building a story or falling down a rabbit hole of thinking about it. We're just contacting our sensory experience, allowing it to rise, flourish, and pass away, moment by moment. Under the cultivation heading, it's right there with the discerning, right there with the noticing. There's that metta qualities. As you're contacting something, the kindness, the acceptance, the equanimity is there. If what you are contacting is unpleasant, lean into the compassionate response. Softening. Softening around that which is unpleasant. If you're noticing something pleasant, lean into that appreciative side, appreciating it, allowing yourself to feel it. Allow that to soak in, and brighten the mind, gladden the overall experience. But regardless of what arises, bring this acceptance, equanimity. Really lean into that metta cultivation. Just infuse all space, all content with the kindness and equanimity. And the more that we are able to discern clearly and cultivate this metta response, helps us to relinquish, let go. Let go of expectations, let go of clinging, let go of the hindrances, the craving, the aversion, the unconsciousness. Let go of the internal struggle. Let go of the clutter, as we can notice the fading away and cessation. We continue to abide along in this way. When in doubt, discern, cultivate, relinquish, abide. Okay, let's lean into those last two, the relinquishing and abiding themes. It's really attuned to the fading away, cessation, the passing away, and the rest states. And the whole act of letting go and gone in our noticing is emptying out, as it were, the emptying out of form, the emptying out of clinging. We're still noticing and cultivating, generating metta, but with a sense of letting go or paying attention to the themes of fading away and rest. What remains in the wake of form passing? What remains in the wake of that sensory event ceasing? Is there relief? Is there just focus and attention? All that metta being generated towards that object, the object ceases. There's just potentially emptiness and metta. These themes of emptying out, of rest, these themes of permeated metta. They can also help to calm, hone, focus attention if we can discern these themes. Thus, the theme of abiding. So, leaning into the relinquishing and abiding. Appreciating the emptying out, appreciating the stilling and the simplifying, relinquishing, knowing, discerning the rest states, abiding along in this way, a pleasant abiding. Okay, good. So maybe drop all intentional technique. Drop any sense of doing efforting. Allow the meditation to do you. Just yield to whatever themes arise. Oftentimes, there may be just whatever theme is going on personally that's happening on its own, independent of the instruction. That's fine. Just go with that and just work. Have your inner wisdom guide you on that. And oftentimes, when we let go of technique, just there's a momentum of themes that we've sensitized ourselves to. So, whatever themes are noticing of emptying out, of filling with metta, appreciating spaciousness that's inside or out, there still will be a discerning. There still may be the presence of metta to some degree. There may be a noticing of relinquishing, letting go. There may be a continued abiding or not. Just go with whatever is happening for you right now. Permit, allow, yield to that. Of course, there can still be a clear seeing and a noticing and discernment. What is your primary experience? And just in the way we were appreciating that which is pleasant about the breath within this primary experience that you discern. And just allow that in. Can you appreciate that which is pleasant about it? Let go of distraction. Continue to abide in this fashion. Knowing your experience and appreciating, relinquishing distractions, relinquishing obstructions, so you can continue on and abide. Okay, at ease. So to review what we did there, entered in with a little shamatha, a little calming, stabilizing of our attention on the breath for a bit. Then we moved in towards a vipassana space, observing the rise and fall of activity in the mind and body. Then we tapped into just the theme of the discernment, cultivation, relinquishing, abiding. So within the discernment, can there be the cultivation of metta? In the noticing, can there be the kindness? In the contacting of our experience, can there be that equanimity? And that activity creates the conditions for the letting go, the relinquishing, as it were. And the more that we can relinquish whatever obstruction, relinquish whatever holding, relinquish whatever distress, it just allows us to just continue on, hang out in the ever unfolding, revealing edge of the present moment. And we leaned into that theme, the first part of the discernment cultivation. And then we leaned into the theme of the second part, the relinquishing, abiding. And then we dropped all technique and just hung out with whatever momentum was going on. Sometimes I like to work in this way because those one can make the argument that those themes of discernment, cultivation, relinquishing, and abiding can be found in the major practices. So there can be a common denominator, if you will, in the vipassana practice. So we're attempting to see clearly what's going on and let go of delusions, and to notice the dukkha, anicca, anatta, the discontent, the impermanence, and the not self. So we're the emphasis will be on that discernment, you know, and supported by that metta quality that allows us to equanimize the hindrances, allows us to relinquish grasping, which then moves it towards relinquishing. And then that abiding in kind of that not self, the anatta component. So clearly, the discernment, cultivation, relinquishing, abiding is all present within the vipassana practice. Within the metta practice, well, the elements are present, but there may be emphasis otherwise. So, of course, clearly the cultivation, because we're cultivating, clearly the kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, equanimity. So there's this cultivation of those skillful mental states. But there's also the discernment is present. We have to clearly feel them, maybe clearly feel what's in the way as well. There can be the anti-metta qualities that can be there. We can be assailed by the hindrances of the craving, aversion, consciousness, restlessness, doubt. We can be assailed by identifying with the emotions, the negative ones in particularly, which tend to squelch some of the metta, the anger, fear, sadness, hopelessness, disgust, etc. So there can be that relinquishing that is necessary as well. So we can continue to abide with the continued cultivation. So those qualities are present within metta as well. And of course, within shamatha, that's the practice or the umbrella of many practices where we're cultivating concentration and settling mind. Of course, we need to discern clearly the object of focus or the non-object. It could be an objectless shamatha, but still there needs to be clear discernment taking place so we're not just fogging out. Oftentimes, the noticing of the pleasant qualities inherent within shamatha, or what shamatha helps to induce, it reinforces the concentration, reinforces the shamatha itself. So the shamatha can allow for a gladdening and balancing effect. So there can be this sense of discerning what's present and kind of a responsive cultivation of these skillful mental states. Of course, there's a relinquishing. The more that we relinquish the hindrances, the more the mind settles. We can continue to abide in a deeper states of concentration. in some forms and fashions until the jhanic factors begin to arise, and then we can go down those paths in which the discernment, cultivation, relinquishing, and abiding still apply. So within all the major realms, practices, techniques of meditation within early Buddhism, I just feel strongly that those qualities are present. So when in doubt, if we can just kind of hang out with those qualities, they'll help us tack into whatever feels to be more appropriate moment by moment. Of course, we can just practice metta, we can just practice vipassana, we can just practice shamatha. But from moment to moment, if we're doing just kind of an open hanging out, or we may switch practices, um, hanging out with those common denominators of those themes of the discernment, cultivation, relinquishing, and abiding. Um, you know, certain practice was we might lean into some facets, lean into the others, and depending on what we lean into, the practice itself can begin to shift its tone. So that's about all I'm going to say on that. I hope that was of some relevance and benefit to you. Um, yeah. So until next time, practice well. We can end with a dedication of merit. And by the merits of these acts and other such virtues, may we attain liberation for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those that come before us, after us, and to those who walk beside us on the path. All right. Have yourselves a wonderful week. Hope to see you next time.